This Christmas event, we received a new Transcendence hero, Star-Devouring Bloom, Madeleine. And with her added to the game, there are new opportunities available to all players, whether you're a newer player, a more experienced player, whether you're in mid-game, it doesn't matter. Star-Devouring Bloom Madeleine is a fantastic support hero, and she will fit onto a multitude of accounts. So today, we're going to be taking a look at her skills and discussing how she can be used on your account for maximum effect. So, the first thing I want to discuss about Madeleine is that she is a priest. This might seem just like her class and nothing special, but there's something you need to know about priests. They're stereotypically not that fast. Support heroes want to be faster than your main damage dealers. So speeding up a hero like Madeleine is going to be something you're wanting to do. Giving her a speed stone, making sure she has resonant armor, or even just making sure that your damage dealer heroes are reduced in speed by removing tenants or taking off shoes, all of that is going to be very important. With that said though, let's take a look at her skills and think, assuming we can make her quicker, what skills she's bringing to your main heroes and the rest of your team. To look at her skills in full, we're going to look at the Tree of Origin, and you'll notice her active skill deals 3000% of attack damage to 3 enemies with the lowest HP, so it's targeting lower HP enemies, which can be useful or detrimental depending on how people build their team to fight you, because in PvP you can respond to this by avoiding who is the lowest HP, but typically this should be fine because in PvE enemies can't adjust their stats. Anyway, it will reduce the control immunity of those selected heroes, which is quite useful if you're trying to crowd control them, and it will restore self HP by 25% of your max HP. So you deal damage, reduce the control immunity of those 3 enemies targeted, and heal Madeleine. Not too bad. Afterward, you'll gain Frantic Gluttony to all allies whose shield value is equal to or higher than 30% of their max HP. So you'll see a trend with Madeleine. A lot of her skills are based on how strong your shields are. Now, in the case of Frantic Gluttony, this will be given to anyone who has a shield that is higher than 30%. So as long as you have a way to reliably give shields to your team, this will come into effect. Heroes like Wukong, Vesa, and Alamak all grant shields, but the strongest of those is most definitely Wukong. So immediately we can tell that she is going to pair nicely alongside Wukong. As well, she reduces the control immunity of opponents. Wukong can stun, so increasing his stun chance by reducing the immunity of enemies is going to be useful as well. So already we're seeing synergy between some powerful heroes. Next, you'll see that we will remove 1 random debuff from the heroes that have those shields as well. So that's nice. If you're being affected by a negative condition, that's useful. When allies with Frantic Gluttony release basic attacks or active skills, restoring HP equal to 10% of their lost HP will happen, and they will gain energy by 3. I think this is a typo. I think that's meant to be 30, because we've never seen energy increases by any number that isn't divisible by 5. So I think this is a mistake, but I am open to being wrong about that. I assume this is 30 energy, not 3. So maybe DH Games will sort this out. If it's 3, it's inconsequential, but still, gaining energy, healing yourself, or when you're under this Frantic Gluttony effect, is already nice. So what does Frantic Gluttony do? Well, it's a skill effect, can't be stacked, and it increases the owner's attack by 15% and their speed by 20%. So buffs up the speed of your whole team. That's really helpful. That's going to allow you to get a little bit of a speed advantage. In PvP, that could be very significant. And increasing attack is nice, of course. That's more damage. And when granting Frantic Gluttony, if the target receiving it gains a new extra effects on the buff, Frantic Gluttony's duration will be refreshed. That means if they're already under the effect of Frantic Gluttony, it will refresh the duration, which is pretty good. When the following conditions are met, the target receiving the buff will gain extra effects. So this is what it means. If you gain any of these extra effects, the time limit will be extended. So if the target has a shield value that is equal to or higher than 40% of their max HP, so that's higher than the 30% requirement for the active, you will receive damage reduction offset by 20%, so that overcomes enemies' damage reduction, and your all damage dealt is increased by 10%. So extra ways of dealing additional damage. So immediately we can see here that Madeleine is buffing the overall damage of your team. Really nice effect. If you have even more shields, besides the effects above, you additionally increase your all damage reduction offset by 25%. So not just damage reduction, but all damage reduction. This is going to definitely help against any defensive opponents. It's going to allow you to do a lot more damage on your key damage dealers. And we haven't really had any heroes in the game before that are stripping this away, outside of heroes like Drake and Luna, who have effects that just rip through all damage reduction effects, including block and dodge. So having just a specific way of giving all heroes all damage reduction offset, that can be pretty strong. And when the owner releases basic attacks or active skills, they'll additionally deal 15% of the target's max HP as damage, and that caps out at 3000% of the owner's attack. All in all, this means Madeleine's active skill, assuming it's affecting heroes who have very strong shields, is going to be an incredible buffing effect. So heroes that give shields, like we said, Wukong being the key example, are going to be instrumental to Madeleine's success. Now, let's see what the enhancements are here. When you're granting the Frantic Gluttony, you additionally remove one random control effect from the target. That's nice. Breaking you free from crowd control is very good. The all damage dealt of Madeleine's attack gets increased, so a little bit of extra burst damage from Madeleine there. And when dealing damage to 3 enemies with the lowest HP, you will additionally reduce their all damage reduction by 10%. So not only are you giving yourself all damage reduction offset to your key heroes, you're also reducing the all damage reduction of enemies as well, meaning that anyone who is sitting behind a golden crown or defensive effects just gets torn to shreds anyway, courtesy of Madeleine. Pretty cool effect. Let's go to the basic attack. This changes to 2000% of damage to 2 enemies with the lowest HP. It reduces their damage reduction by 10% and restores HP equal to 20% of the lost HP. That's fine. That's a little bit of a heal to Madeleine for dealing damage to an opponent. It's not a phenomenal basic attack, but it's something. The rest of the skills here, it'll increase the precision of the attack. The Deep Sublimation says it grants a shield equal to 1500% of attack to 2 enemies with the lowest HP. This is a common typo mistake with Madeleine. This is actually giving a shield to the 2 allies with the lowest HP. So it's a bit unfortunate DH Games have done this. I think like the energy treatment here, I think DH Games just need to go ahead and fix this. I'm sure they will, but fingers crossed it's sooner rather than later. And finally, her basic attack has a 50% chance to additionally increase her own energy by 20. Normally, a basic attack gives you 50 energy, so an additional 20 here takes you to 70. This isn't incredible, but it's still something to help to get you to those active skills quicker. Next, we've got Boundless Sepal, which is her passive 2. When Star Devouring Blue Madeleine is healed, she will give 3 random allies a shield equal to 500% of her attack. So this is really nice. It just means that you're healing Madeleine and simultaneously dishing out shields to your team. This is going to be really good for getting shields out there to maximize the effectiveness of Madeleine's active skill. This effect can be triggered up to 3 times each round, and when that limit is reached, there is a 60% chance to inflict stun on each of 3 enemies with the lowest HP for 2 rounds. So a lot of what Madeleine is doing is focusing on lower HP enemies, reducing their control immunity with her active, and then stunning them with her passive. This makes a lot of sense. To trigger this, though, you are going to need multiple sources of healing on Madeleine. Good thing you've already seen here, there's lots of healing abilities at her disposal. The sublimation for this is just a simple HP and attack increase. When Self is healed, she'll reduce the backline enemy's control immunity by 10%, so potentially giving that stun a stronger chance to hit. And finally, when the limit is reached, she'll restore all allies' HP by 6% of their max HP and increase their attack by 6% for 3 rounds. So a small buff and a bit of healing being granted as well to go alongside that stun. Her final skill here is the Infused with Flavor. When Madeleine has more than 100 energy, if her HP is no lower than 70%, she will reduce HP equal to 60% of her max HP and grants Self and backline allies a shield equal to 40% of their max HP and increase their control immunity by 15% for 2 rounds. That's a nice protective buff and a good response to her HP being knocked down. This is going to take her to a very, very low point, though, in her HP, which is a little bit alarming, but granting the shield is going to be extremely useful, and hopefully that's going to be enough to keep her in this. In fact, one thing I would note here is it's her Self and backline allies, so I'd consider putting Madeleine on the front line to maximize the distribution of that shield. If her HP, on the other hand, is lower than 70%, she will restore HP by 15% of her max HP and grant herself a shield equal to 15% of her max HP. So a nice way of emergency giving herself a shield. This effect can only be triggered 1 time in one round. So it's a nice way of emergency blasting a shield out to your team if you get over 100 energy. This means starting her off with an energy artifact is a good idea, because it means when she immediately gets hit, everyone is going to get a shield, because she shouldn't drop below 70%. And if she does, she can just give herself a shield and heal. So I do like these abilities that we have here from Madeleine. When you sublime that, she gets some HP and attack. If her HP is no lower than 60%, she'll increase backline allies all damage reduction. Nice defense for those. And if her HP is lower than 60% and still lower than 60% after restoring the HP, there is a chance to additionally gain an additional 15% of max HP. So all in all, what Madeleine is doing here is healing herself, granting shields to the team, has a potential chance to stun opponents, but the main and crucial part of her effects are going to be the Frantic gluttony, which is going to be giving us abilities to bypass enemy defenses, reward us for having shields, and improve our all damage dealt, while simultaneously reducing the control immunity of 3 enemies with the lowest HP. I like this, and I think it's going to be a good supporting hero to increase the damage of your team. Madeleine's core is interesting. When Self receives an active skill, for every one ally whose shield is not lower than 30% of max HP, restores all allies' HP by 500% of attack. Then, for every one ally whose shield is not lower than 40% of their max HP, excluding herself, increases all allies' control immunity by 4.5% for 2 rounds. For every one ally whose shield is not lower than 50% of max HP, increases all allies' all damage dealt by 4.5% for 2 rounds. So that is a large all damage dealt buff to your team if they have lots of heroes on that team with over 50% shields. So the core is stronger the more access to shields your team has. This is quite a cool buff. I don't know if this is going to get used quite frequently. We have a lot of reliably good cores, but it's an interesting option available for people if they want to improve their all damage dealt. It only comes into play when you release an active skill, though, so that's something to bear in mind. And it's also important to consider that for that reason, if you want to maximize this, it's important to have Madeleine be one of your earlier moving heroes. Probably you want a hero who can dish out shields and then have Madeleine come afterwards to immediately capitalize on those shields. So it already benefits with that kind of strategy when you consider both her active skill and her core, which will trigger on active skills, rewards heroes having over 50% shields, because that's how you maximize the benefits from Frantic Gluttony as well. Madeleine looks like she's going to benefit from an energy feed strategy where you have active skills happening every round, multiple demon bells and elusive mirror at your disposal to maximize energy, and assuming she's wearing one herself, it's going to make the infusing with flavor passive much easier to trigger. So already this fits into intuitive team building design. What is also worth mentioning is that Madeleine is a tenant for some really, really interesting heroes. The most important of these is Williams. Normally in Tenant Spot 4, you'd have to build Asmodel the Dauntless. A solid hero with decent defenses, but mainly used as a damage dealer on budget accounts. Asmodel was an okay addition, but not the strong support hero you'd necessarily want for a Williams. With Madeleine being available now, it makes Williams a much more interesting choice to build early on, because Madeleine supports Williams whilst also being a tenant. That means a solid 3 starting heroes when you switch to Williams as a damage dealer, probably after completing the Glory Challenge. You can use Williams with Madeleine, and then as we already discussed, Wukong works really nicely as well, because he's going to grant shields. Wukong synergizes with Madeleine fantastically because of the shields he gives, but also synergizes brilliantly with Williams because he offers crowd control without stealing energy from opponents, which allows Williams's effects to work properly. Betty, on the other hand, who is a common crowd control choice, steals energy from enemies, which conflicts with Williams's effects. So Wukong has always been favored. The fact Williams allows for Madeleine to be usable with him as a tenant means building Madeleine early alongside Williams is probably going to be a strong option for Williams users moving forwards, and this could potentially cement Williams' place as one of the strongest damage dealers moving into 2026. Already, Williams has proven this year to be a fantastic damage dealer, being very, very good in late game for clearing Void campaign, and even earlier players have had phenomenal success using Williams with a Breath of Forest Spirit to clear through campaign very far, very quickly. Many of whom have just used B tiers to do that without needing Giant Killer or Defier to allow their Williams to perform well. And this was all before Madeleine was released. Adding Madeleine to the game gives more support options for Williams, adds him a viable Tenant, and therefore is only a benefit for Williams as a hero. So I think 2026 is going to be a huge year for Williams, arguably being the strongest hero available for people to build. Aspen and Natalie are still going to be better choices for dealing with Void bosses, but the fact that Madeleine now grants even more reasons to build a Williams, you'll see him popping up more and more, no doubt, and even endgame players are probably going to pivot towards using him over already existing strategies with Vulcan, Alakita, or Mockman. That's not to say those heroes are bad, they are still absolutely fantastic, and I myself will still be using Alakita for this year, no doubt. But those of you that wanted to try Williams, Madeleine is going to be a hero that allows that strategy to be available to you. Because Madeleine, being a Tenant, just adds even more support for Williams. If you're not a Williams user, the only other hero Madeleine is a Tenant for is Vespera, a hero which is used infrequently on teams, and she's an okay support hero, but by no means a must build. If we look at Madeleine's house, you'll see she doesn't have very good Tenants either. Basilisk, probably a hero you're not going to be building unless you want to build him as a damage dealer, so using him as a Tenant doesn't make much sense. And Finn, a hero who has really struggled to find himself a reason to be built on accounts outside of PvP. So with a hero like Madeleine, what I would recommend if you did want to build her and you weren't building Williams is instead just build some of these smaller heroes to 10-star to allow her to get a speed bonus in the Celestial Island. Remember how we said earlier on that priests are slow and therefore having increased speed is always going to be good. So maybe you want to put Madeleine in a house to speed her up, to allow her to be quicker, so that she can get her active skill effects out before your main damage dealer much more easily. So if you're considering building Madeleine on your account, using her as a side homeowner hero alongside your main damage dealer for that reason is something to consider. We'll discuss some other ways to use Madeleine and when to build her on your account in a second, but before we do, let's take a look at her destiny abilities. You'll see, when she has 12 layers of transition power, she will consume them and grant all allies a shield equal to 20% of their max HP. When this is Nirvana, that buff becomes 30% of their max HP. She'll grant one random enemy without Frantic Gluttony a shield. That's meant to be an ally without Frantic Gluttony, because for some reason they kept putting enemy when it came to granting shields here. DH Games, please fix the typos on your heroes. And you'll also get Frantic Gluttony for 2 rounds as well. As for allies who gain the most extra effects of Frantic Gluttony, she'll additionally increase their attack by 15% and crit damage by 15%. So that's the heroes who have the very high stacks of shields and get lots of Frantic Gluttony anyway. Once this is further enhanced, you'll see that the additional increases are 25% to both crit and attack. That's 3 rounds. And, as well, those heroes who don't gain the most extra effects from Frantic Gluttony have a 60% chance to gain the extra effect of the next level of Frantic Gluttony and refresh its duration. So what that basically means is even if you don't have enough shields to get the top effects of the Gluttony effect, you still potentially can if you have access to this Nirvana ability on Madeleine. The only downside of this effect is it does use 12 layers, which is unfortunate. That means you need to do 2 active skills to get to the 6 layers needed, which means, again, an energy feed strategy is going to be good on her to trigger this in round 2. It's still manageable, but once this does trigger, you get some nice effects, either improving your ally's damage reduction, restoring one ally with the lowest HP's health, or increasing the energy of your allies. I like the defense buff, but energy is definitely something to consider. Next, we can increase all allies' effect of being healed, and that's not really that exciting, but increasing backline allies' all damage reduction by 8% could potentially be useful. And finally, I love this one. This increases the all damage dealt of one ally with the highest attack by 15%, so buffing your main damage dealer. Love that effect. That's very nice. Additionally, you'll reduce all backline enemies' attack by 10%, so that will stack with attack reduction strategies. You could instead reduce all damage dealt of 2 enemies with the highest attack by 10% for 2 rounds. I'd rather steal enemies' attack, because once that's 0, it doesn't matter what their all damage dealt is, but still pretty interesting. Or you can reduce the frontline enemy's energy by 20. I think an attack reduction strategy is arguably the best one here. And her Polystar ability will increase self-control precision by 8%. If there's nothing better, that's okay. You could instead additionally increase backline allies all damage dealt by 10% for 2 rounds. I do like this more, especially if your main damage dealer is on the backline. And finally, you could instead increase your speed by 50 for 2 rounds. There are weird strategies that involve triggering these effects to start slower than your main damage dealer, then overtake them quickly. That's something that people who use Vulcan are probably implementing to some great effect. So it's cool that this ability is available to us to bump up her speed if we wanted, but more importantly, if you look here, the control precision increase could have some effect, but I do mainly like this increase of all damage dealt by 10% to your backline allies. So Madeleine has a very solid destiny tree focused on support effects, so if you wanted to destiny her, you will probably get some decent value out of her. The only downside is you need 12 layers to trigger her effects, and that requires you to have a Madeleine who is getting 2 active skills, both giving 6 layers each. So it's going to take some time to trigger this destiny effect, but it's still pretty good. So Madeleine definitely finds a place as a Destiny hero on accounts. More importantly, if you're a Williams user though, as obviously a Destiny Tenant is going to give a lot of bonuses to attack and HP. But also, you could build her on your account, make her a homeowner, and then give her a good speed buff for doing so, and have her performing nicely with your team. The only weird thing about Madeleine is deciding when to build her. With Williams, it's a little obvious. She's a really solid hero early on because she can be used as a Tenant. But I think you need to strongly consider the other heroes available to you and the problems that they're solving. Madeleine doesn't really solve problems. She simply enhances strategies that exist, like granting shields, and buffs your damage a little bit more. If your problem was, I'm not dealing enough damage, then sure, Madeleine could be an addition. But for many people, you could be struggling against control effects, in which case Melissa's ability to remove CC could be more valuable. Elena has a similar thing when enemies trigger active skills. If you're struggling with the damage of your critical hits, it's arguable that Halora probably is still better, thanks to her Abyssal Corruption ability, giving such a strong increase of damage when you deal critical strikes to opponents, and this stat works independently of crit damage. It just improves the whole damage dealt by a critical hit, meaning Abyssal Corruption is a very strong effect, and once you stack multiple layers, it can do a heck of a lot more than Madeleine can for buffs. Maybe you're struggling with not having crowd control on your team, and in that case, you'd probably want to be considering running either Wukong, so that he can stun and also simultaneously buff your team, or run a hero like Betty, who can loop crowd control thanks to self-energy feed and trigger it multiple times, especially once you have all the right materials like her core and elusive mirror on your team to make Betty continuously lock down enemies, making them unable to attack you. So there are some considerations of heroes to add before you build Madeleine, and then there's heroes who arguably have significantly stronger Nirvana abilities that can be abused very well. Star Alchemist Holmes Young has such an effect, which can trigger whenever an ally releases an active skill, meaning you can stack multiple reductions of attack to enemies, making them essentially do no damage to you whatsoever, and you can do a very similar ability with Bloodtide Queen Arania, who has an effect that also triggers whenever an ally's active skill successfully hits a target, and will also steal their attack. So if you're looking for a hero to be your next Nirvana, arguably Arania and Star Alchemist Holmes Young are better picks if you don't already have them. If you have access to crowd control, you've improved your damage with heroes like Halora, and you arguably can not struggle against crowd control because heroes like Elena and Melissa are keeping you safe, then maybe it's time to consider adding Madeleine to improve your damage and your healing and your shields. And her main benefit is going to be the fact she bypasses enemies' all damage reduction and damage reduction, which means against opponents who have lots of protection, Madeleine can offer you unmatched enhancements to your damage, because otherwise your entire damage that you're doing is going to get stopped by those abilities. So by removing it with Madeleine, you significantly improve the overall damage of your team. This is going to be strong against bosses, Star Expedition, and other places where damage reduction and all damage reduction are present, which means Madeleine is definitely going to have a mainstay on account moving forwards. I do believe some of her abilities are currently bugged and not working as intended, and of course we have already seen that there are typos in her effects, but once DH Games addresses those things and fixes her to function properly, I imagine into the year ahead, Madeleine is going to be definitely a fun hero, and I can't wait to see how people use her, and most importantly, I can't wait to see how she benefits William's users, because I think that's where she's truly going to shine as a tenant for him. So, as long as you're building your Madeleine with energy, she is faster than most of your team, and you have energy feed to get multiple active skills, Madeleine is going to be a really, really cool hero. For that reason, if you're wondering about stones, I'd recommend speed stones, and if that's not necessary, you can probably go with attack to make her a strong tenant, or just something that offers an increase to heal effect, HP, and attack, something like that, as that will improve her shields and her healing abilities. Probably speed, though, is the most important stat on her, so if in doubt, just give her a speed precision stone, or a speed attack stone, or maybe even speed heal effect. I'm sure as next year rolls in, we'll see Madeleine getting tested more by the community, and it'll be exciting to see what great things she brings. Let me know what you think of Madeleine in the comment section down below, and as always guys, have an amazing week, and happy idling.